We are expecting to hear from President Biden this afternoon after his meetings with allies in Brussels, and we've learned that the United States is taking even more action to punish Russia and help refugees fleeing Ukraine. For more on this, I want to bring in John Kirby, the Pentagon press secretary. He is in Brussels for these meetings, and he joins us now. Admiral, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
So we just reported that the United States is imposing more sanctions against Russian politicians and more than 40 defense companies. What's the goal of these sanctions, given that there have already been crushing sanctions placed on Russia over the last month since this invasion began? How do we expect these to affect their military operations?
Well, we have never taken off the table. The president has been very clear that he's going to keep his options open when it comes to economic consequences for Mr. Putin and this unprovoked war of aggression. So you're going to continue to see the administration explore additional opportunities to do exactly that. And I think this is of a piece of that. Yes, his economy is in tatters. And yes, the ruble is almost worthless. And yes, it's going to take a sting out of his ability to wage war. But it doesn't mean that we're going to stop continuing to look for consequences to encourage, quite frankly, Mr. Putin to do the right thing here and end this war.
The other bit of news that we learned now is that the U.S. will welcome 100,000 Ukrainian refugees. I don't know if you can speak to this, but do we know how that's going to work? Is some of that red tape that has been dropped by some of the European nations that have taken in refugees, is that going to happen with the U.S. as well?
Well, the State Department will be managing this and working through the refugee system that's in place. And as you probably know, the system that is set up to take in refugees works on a different level than normal visas, for instance. I mean, it can move with a little bit more speed. And so I know the State Department's going to be working this very, very hard. But we're proud to be able to contribute to international efforts to provide a home for those who now have lost everything in Ukraine. And we understand most of them want to go back home. And clearly, that's everybody's goal. But the United States wants to step up here and be welcoming to those who have been so terribly affected by the death and destruction inside Ukraine. Again, State Department will work this. They'll work it inside that refugee assistance program that they have in place, which has its own mechanisms that are different than, for instance, when you apply for a visa to go to another country.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Admiral, I had an interesting discussion with General H.R. McMaster this morning, and it focused on what some military strategists are calling Russian ineptitude when it comes to this invasion of Ukraine. In fact, General McMaster, when I asked him directly if he believed that Ukraine could at least maybe not win this war, but prevent Russia from taking further actions in the days and weeks ahead, he seemed optimistic about that even without NATO support. What is your understanding of why the Russians have not? I mean, it's sort of fascinating that since 1938, the strategy has always been to take out airfields, to take out airstrips, to, resupply your forward troops. They haven't been able to do that. We know that they've been intercepted using cell phones, Russian troops have, to engage their commanders on the ground. What's our understanding of what's going on there? I mean, did we overestimate, I guess, the Russian military?
I think the Russians overestimated their own capabilities, and they underestimated the skillfulness and the bravery, the competence of Ukrainian armed forces in terms of resistance. So clearly they have suffered a lot of missteps and problems of their own, logistics and sustainment. They're running out of fuel. They're having trouble feeding their troops. You've seen the video of Russian troops pillaging, convenience stores and grocery stores and trying to feed themselves. They are having inventory issues with respect to some of their precision-guided munitions. They have not, it doesn't appear like they properly factored in what war on this scale was going to be like. This is not a military operation, a war that they have conducted in a long, long time on this scale, with this size, with this many troops and that many capabilities. Now, look, we obviously want to see the war end, and Mr. Putin can do that today by negotiating in good faith with President Zelensky and ending the war. What he is running into every single day is a Ukrainian armed force that continues to be where they need to be to defend bravely, and now they're going on the counterattack in some places, and a united NATO. Here we are in Brussels, a united NATO, to make sure that Mr. Putin knows, the world knows, that we're all allies are going to defend every inch of NATO territory if it comes to that.
So as you know, and you pointed out, President Zelensky, or at least Russian representatives and Ukrainian representatives have been talking for the past several weeks. Those talks have not gone anywhere, but at least they're talking, I suppose. But now we learned from you that, that Russia has declined calls to meet with, to speak with Defense Secretary Austin and Chairman Mark Milley. I got to ask you, can we depend on diplomatic efforts? Is that even a real thing now, particularly as they've been ongoing? Russia has been stepping up their assaults.
Diplomacy is the best way forward here. In the United States, the president, Secretary Austin, still believes that that's the best way forward to ending this war is a negotiated settlement, a ceasefire that can be enforced, and just the end to this death and destruction. So we still believe that diplomacy can work here, but it has to be two-sided, right? The Russians have to prove a willingness and an ability and a desire to get there, and we just haven't seen that come from the Russian side. You mentioned the phone calls. We're going to continue to try to reach out to our counterparts at the Pentagon, our counterparts from the Pentagon, to see if they'll talk. So far, they haven't been willing to. It's got to be two-sided here. And in the meantime, while diplomacy is still being attempted, in the meantime, at the Department of Defense and in the United States, we're going to continue to do everything we can to help Ukraine defend itself. That includes getting them the kinds of arms and ammunition and the weapon systems that they are using so effectively in the field to stymie Russian advances. And number two, as I said, making sure that our NATO allies know that the United States, we're an ally too. We take that responsibility seriously. We've added now 20,000 more troops to Europe. We now have 100,000, well, actually a little bit more than 100,000 troops in Europe as you and I are speaking today. And that's just an example of the kind of commitment that we're making to the alliance.
Admiral, let me ask you, the world woke up this morning to news that North Korea fired its first suspected ICBM missile since 2017. How is the United States responding to this latest missile test?
Well, we're all obviously deeply concerned by this. We've condemned this launch. We're still analyzing this particular launch to make sure we fully understand what it was and what the intent was. So I don't want to get ahead of that process. But again, we call on North Korea to stop these provocative test launches, to be serious again about some sort of negotiations and discussions. The United States has been very clear. President Biden has made it very clear that we're willing to sit down with Pyongyang without preconditions to try to talk about a negotiated way forward here, and to get the security environment on the peninsula less unstable than it is right now, and that means addressing the continued nuclear ambitions of North Korea and their continued development of dangerous long-range missile systems. So we're ready to sit down and talk, but we're not seeing any sign that Pyongyang is willing to do that. In fact, quite the opposite. What we're seeing is what we saw just the other day, or just last night, another test of a long-range missile system, totally in violation of UN Security Council resolution. So we're going to be talking with allies and partners about this going forward.
I just want to pivot back to Ukraine now. CNN is reporting that a Russian general had an outburst last week with a meeting that he was having with U.S. military officials. Can you shed any more light on that?
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to talk about that particular reporting. I mean, I've seen the article and I've seen and I understand what it's based on. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to talk about that particular report. Again, I would just say that, back to what we were talking about before about communications. Through our attaché's office there in Moscow, we actually do have an ability to communicate with the Russians. We have a deconfliction line set up at NATO, at European Command headquarters in Germany, so that we can talk to them at a tactical level should airspace be an issue. It hasn't yet been so far. We have these ways of communicating. What we really would like is more ways to communicate with Russia to make sure that we can continue to express our deep concerns about the path that Russia's on right now, which is really a path to their own failure here. They are getting resisted very, very strongly by the Ukrainians. We still believe a negotiated settlement is the way forward here, and we're looking for ways to help Russia realize it's time to de-escalate. It's time to end this war.
All right, John Kirby, thank you so much for giving us time.
My pleasure.